I never thought I would see the day when my own parents would drag me to court over buying my first house. After working 70-hour weeks for 5 years at my tech job, saving every penny possible, I finally achieved my dream of homeownership at 30. The pride I felt walking through that front door with my own keys quickly turned to disbelief when I received court papers. My parents were suing me because, as they coldly stated, "That house should go to your sister." Before I tell you how I went from homeowner to defendant in my own family drama, let me know where you all are watching from today, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had family turn on you when you succeeded. Growing up in Portland, I had what most would consider a normal middle-class childhood. My parents, Robert and Sandra Thompson, seemed like typical parents who worked hard to provide for our family. I was close with them during those early years, always trying to make them proud with good grades and helpful behavior around the house. My sister Megan came along when I was 4, and we developed the usual sibling relationship with occasional fights but underlying affection. From an early age, I showed a strong work ethic that my parents appeared to appreciate. While my friends were spending their weekends playing video games, I was mowing lawns in the neighborhood to save money. By 16, I had secured my first official job at the local grocery store, working evenings and weekends to build my college fund. I can still remember how my dad would pat me on the back when I would show him my savings account growing steadily. He would say things like, "King, you are going to go far with that attitude." My mother would brag to her friends about how responsible and independent I was becoming. When college acceptance letters arrived, I chose the state university with a strong computer science program. Unlike many of my classmates whose parents covered their expenses, I worked 20 hours a week at the campus IT department while maintaining a full course load. My parents contributed what they could, but I took pride in my self-sufficiency, believing it was building character. After graduating with my computer science degree, I landed a solid programming job at a growing tech company. The pay was good, but I lived modestly, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates to maximize my savings. Each month, I would put aside a significant portion of my paycheck toward my homeownership fund. For 5 years, I maintained this disciplined approach. While friends took exotic vacations or leased luxury cars, I drove my old college sedan and spent weekends exploring free hiking trails instead of nightclubs. The dream of having my own place kept me motivated through long coding sessions and overtime projects. When I finally hit my savings goal, I began house hunting with genuine excitement. The market was competitive, but after looking at 27 properties, I found the perfect 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and parks nearby. It had a small yard, updated kitchen, and an extra room I could use as a home office. At 30, I was about to achieve what many of my generation considered impossible independent homeownership. The day I got pre-approved for my mortgage was one of the proudest moments of my life. I called my parents, immediately expecting them to share my excitement. Instead, their reaction was strangely subdued. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly and asked, "Isn't that a lot of house just for you?" Mom jumped in with, "Wouldn't you rather wait until you have a family? Seems like a waste of money right now." I noticed them exchanging glances on the video call, but brushed it off as typical parental concern. Maybe they were just worried about me taking on such a big financial responsibility. I assured them I had done my research and could comfortably afford the payments. When my offer was accepted, I was ecstatic. I called my parents again with the good news, expecting more enthusiasm now that it was really happening. Their congratulations came after an uncomfortable pause and felt cold, rehearsed. What struck me as odd was the complete silence from my sister Megan. She was usually quick to like and comment on my social media posts, but when I shared my house news, there was nothing from her. Not even a simple congratulations text. 2 weeks before closing, my parents invited me for dinner. Throughout the meal, they asked unusually detailed questions about the house. What street was it on? How many bedrooms? What was the neighborhood like? I answered enthusiastically, pulling up photos on my phone to show them. Then my mom mentioned something that caught my attention. "That neighborhood is where Megan has been renting, isn't it?" I hadn't realized it, but yes, my new house was only about 10 blocks from my sister's apartment. Dad nodded knowingly and added, "Megan has been looking at houses there too, but with her teacher salary, she hasn't been able to afford one." An uncomfortable tension filled the room. I tried to lighten the mood by offering I could give her some house hunting tips if she wants. I learned a lot through this process. My father exchanged another strange look with my mother before saying cryptically, "That won't be necessary." The conversation shifted to other topics, but the strange undercurrent remained. I left their house that night with an uneasy feeling I couldn't quite place. Closing day finally arrived, and I signed all the paperwork with growing excitement. The realtor handed me the keys with a congratulatory handshake, and just like that, I was a homeowner. As I was driving to my new house, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "We need to talk. This is serious." That evening, instead of celebrating my first night in my new home, I drove to my parents' house, concern growing with every mile. They were sitting stiffly in the living room when I arrived, their faces unusually stern. Without preamble, my father stated, "We think you should sign the house over to your sister." I laughed, thinking it was some bizarre joke. But no one was smiling. My mother leaned forward, her voice deadly serious. "Megan needs it more than you do, King." They proceeded to explain that my sister was 4 months pregnant and had recently been dumped by her boyfriend. As a single mother to be on a teacher's salary, they argued she needed a stable home more than I did as a single man with a good income. I was dumbfounded. Did they really expect me to just hand over the house I had saved for years to buy? A house I had researched, toured, negotiated for, and secured financing for on my own? When I expressed this, the conversation quickly escalated. My father's face reddened as he snapped, "You've always been selfish, but we never thought you'd go this far. Family is supposed to help family." My mother added fuel with her guilt trip. "After all we've done for you, all the sacrifices we've made. How can you be so heartless toward your own sister?" I left their house in a state of shock, unable to process what had just happened. Over the next few days, my phone exploded with texts and calls from extended family members. Some expressed outrage at my selfishness, while others cautiously asked for my side of the story. The family was dividing into camps over a situation that seemed completely surreal. There were also missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I was too overwhelmed to return them, focusing instead on moving my belongings into the new house that was suddenly at the center of a family war. A week after moving in, I was still unpacking boxes when I heard the mail slot clatter. Among the usual change of address confirmations and promotional flyers was a certified letter. I signed for it with the delivery person, then opened it in my kitchen. My hands started shaking as I read the legal header: Plaintiffs Robert and Sandra Thompson versus 1. Defendant King Thompson. My own parents were actually suing me. This wasn't just a family disagreement. It was now a legal battle. The lawsuit made outrageous claims that I had somehow stolen a housing opportunity from my sister. It alleged that my parents had verbally promised to help both children equally with housing, and by purchasing this specific house, I had deliberately undermined their plans to help Megan. They were demanding that the court force me to sell the house to my sister at my purchase price, essentially transferring all the equity it built and the work it done finding and securing the property. They even had the audacity to claim emotional damages for Megan. I sank to the kitchen floor, legal papers scattered around me, and experienced my first panic attack. The room seemed to spin as I struggled to breathe. This house that represented years of hard work and sacrifice was now the center of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, I called my best friend Jason. Thank God for Jason. He listened without judgment, then immediately recommended his cousin Caroline Wilson, who practiced family law. That night was the first of many sleepless ones in my new home. I laid awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the achievement I had been so proud of had turned into this twisted situation. How could my parents do this to me? What had I missed all these years about our relationship? The next day at work, I was completely distracted. My coworkers noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the humiliating situation. How do you tell people your own parents are suing you? I took emergency personal days to meet with Caroline and try to process what was happening. Caroline Wilson was a sharp attorney in her 40s with a no-nonsense attitude that immediately made me feel like I had someone in my corner. After reviewing the case documents, she looked up at me with disbelief. "This case has virtually no legal merit, King," she explained. "Verbal promises about future gifts aren't legally binding, and you had every right to purchase any house on the market." But she warned, that doesn't mean fighting it will be easy or cheap. They seem determined, and family court cases can get extremely messy and expensive. The painful realization hit me: my parents were willing to cause me significant financial damage by forcing me to defend myself against their baseless claims. Even if I won, I would lose thousands in legal fees and endless emotional energy. The situation grew even more complicated when Megan showed up at my house unannounced. Her pregnancy was beginning to show as she stood on my porch with tears streaming down her face. "Mom and Dad say you're ruining my baby's future," she sobbed. "How could you be so selfish, King? You know I need this house more than you do." As we talked, I realized something heartbreaking. My sister genuinely believed I was the villain in this story. My parents had convinced her that I had somehow cheated her out of her rightful home. She had no idea that I had spent years saving for this purchase while our parents had apparently been making her promises they couldn't or wouldn't keep. The first court appearance was surreal. I walked past my parents in the hallway, and they didn't even make eye contact. Their lawyer, a theatrical man with an expensive suit and booming voice, presented their case with dramatic flourishes about family values and moral obligations. My parents' testimonies painted me as a calculating, selfish son who had always received preferential treatment and was now refusing to support his vulnerable sister. My mother actually cried on the stand while describing her worry for her future grandchild's well-being. Megan testified about her housing insecurity while pregnant, making it sound as if I had deliberately targeted the only house she could possibly live in rather than the reality that I had simply bought a home in a neighborhood that happened to be near her apartment. The judge asked several skeptical questions about the legal basis for their claims, but allowed the case to proceed. I left that first hearing feeling both relieved that the judge seemed to see through some of the emotional manipulation, but deeply disturbed that the case wasn't immediately dismissed. Things took an even darker turn when a local newspaper picked up the story. "Family Feud Brother Refuses to Help Pregnant Sister" was the headline that greeted me one morning. The article was full of quotes from my parents but mentioned that I had declined to comment, a courtesy no one had actually extended to me. The comments section was filled with strangers calling me selfish and heartless. Anonymous threats started arriving in my mailbox. One morning I woke to find "selfish" spray painted on my garage door. My social media accounts were flooded with hateful messages from people who had read the one-sided story and appointed themselves judges of my character. The final blow came when I learned through my cousin that I hadn't been invited to the annual family Thanksgiving gathering. My cousin Taylor felt bad enough to call and let me know, and during our conversation she revealed something that made the pieces start to fall into place. "You know, your parents had actually promised Megan she could have first pick of houses in that neighborhood when she was ready," Taylor told me. They had been telling her for years they were saving to help her with a down payment. But according to Taylor, my parents had recently spent a significant sum on a luxury Mediterranean cruise instead. When Megan found out I was buying a house in her target neighborhood, she was devastated because my parents had led her to believe she would be the first to buy there with their financial help. It suddenly became clear my parents were using my success to cover for their broken promises to my sister. Rather than admit to Megan they had spent the money they promised her, they were painting me as the villain who needed to fix their mistake. The breaking point came when my supportive Aunt Janet secretly sent me an audio recording. She had been at my parents' house for a small gathering and overheard them discussing the case in their study. She was so disturbed by what she heard that she recorded part of the conversation on her phone. In the recording, my mother clearly stated King can afford the legal fees and maybe hell just give up and let Megan have the house if we drag this out long enough. My father responded, "And if he doesn't, maybe we can force him to sell at a loss. Either way, we won't have to explain to Megan what happened to the money we promised her." That night I experienced a complete emotional collapse. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my parents came crashing down. Had they always seen me as just a convenient solution to their problems? Had my independence and success just made me a target rather than a source of pride for them? I questioned every memory, every childhood moment I had cherished. The next morning, I called Caroline with a new resolve in my voice. I was done being the victim in this story. "What are our options for a countersuit?" I asked. Caroline suggested we could countersue for harassment and legal fees, which would be the standard response. But something in me had fundamentally changed. I wanted more than just a defensive position. I wanted to expose the pattern of manipulation that had led to this point. Over the next week, I dug into my parents' financial history as much as I could access. With the help of a financial forensic specialist, Caroline recommended we discovered several concerning patterns. There were tax irregularities in my parents' small business. More disturbing were indications they had used Megan's credit for loans without her full knowledge of the terms. Going even further back, I found documentation that my parents had borrowed from my college fund without my knowledge, years ago delaying my education by a year while I worked to replace the money. They had never repaid it despite promises to do so. Armed with this information, I made a risky decision to meet with Megan without our parents' knowledge. We met at a quiet cafe far from both our neighborhoods, and I laid out everything I'd discovered, including the recording of our parents discussing their real motivations. At first, Megan refused to believe it. She accused me of doctoring the evidence and trying to turn her against our parents. But as I methodically showed her document after document, including credit inquiries in her name, she hadn't known about her denial, turned to shock then, to a quiet, simmering anger. "They told me you bought that house to spite me," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said you knew I wanted to live in that neighborhood, and you purposely outbid me on a house I was looking at." I showed her the timeline of my house search and purchase documents, all predating any knowledge I had of her interest in the neighborhood. Then I showed her something else. Financial records indicating our parents had spent the money they promised for her down payment months before I even started looking for a house. "They made me the villain because they broke their promise to you," I explained gently. "And now they're trying to force me to fix their mistake." For the first time in months, Megan and I had an honest conversation. She confessed that our parents had always positioned us as competitors rather than allies, constantly comparing our achievements and setting different expectations. While they demanded independence from me, they had fostered dependence in her, making promises of support that kept her from developing her own financial security. By the end of our meeting, we had formed a plan. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting to break a toxic pattern that had damaged both our lives. The day of our second court appearance, I arrived with a confidence I hadn't felt in months. My parents sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, looking smugly certain of their victory. Their lawyer continued his emotional appeal to the judge, painting vivid pictures of a pregnant teacher forced to live in a tiny apartment while her selfish brother enjoyed a spacious home. Then came the moment that changed everything. My lawyer, Caroline, called a surprise witness, Megan. My parents' faces showed confusion, then alarm as Megan walked to the witness stand. She was 7 months pregnant now, and the judge watched attentively as she was sworn in. "I want to withdraw from this lawsuit," were her first words. My brother King did nothing wrong, and I was misled about the situation. She then testified about discovering our parents' financial manipulations, including loans taken in her name without full disclosure. She apologized to me directly in the courtroom for believing the lies she had been told about my intentions. Caroline methodically presented the evidence we had gathered: tax documents showing irregularities, loan documents in Megan's name, that she hadn't fully understood, bank statements showing our parents' lavish spending shortly before they had, claimed they couldn't help Megan with housing. As the evidence mounted, the judge's expression grew increasingly concerned. My parents' lawyer requested a recess, during which my parents tried desperately to speak with Megan in the hallway. She refused, staying firmly by my side. When court reconvened, my parents looked defeated. Caroline presented a motion to dismiss the case with prejudice, along with a request for my parents to cover all my legal fees. She also requested a temporary restraining order against my parents, citing the harassment and property damage I had experienced. The judge delivered a stern lecture to my parents about the abuse of the court system for what appeared to be a family disagreement with no legal basis. He granted the dismissal with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile the case, and ordered them to pay all my legal costs. He also warned them that the financial evidence presented could potentially trigger an investigation into their business practices if they didn't comply with the judgment. My parents sat in stunned silence as the judge issued his ruling. Their plan had backfired spectacularly, and now they were facing both financial and potential legal consequences for their actions. Megan and I walked out of the courthouse together, ignoring the reporters who had gathered due to the local interest in the case. We declined to comment, but the image of us walking out together, her pregnant and me supportive, spoke volumes compared to the divided family narrative that had been circulating. For the first time since buying my house, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. The vindication wasn't just about keeping my property. It was about exposing a lifetime of manipulation and breaking free from it. In the weeks that followed, my parents made desperate attempts to contact both Megan and me. They left voicemails alternating between anger and tearful apologies. They sent emails trying to explain away their actions as misunderstandings or claiming they had only wanted what was best for the family. We both maintained our distance, needing time to process the betrayal and rebuild our lives without their toxic influence. Extended family members chose sides with some cutting ties with us, while others expressed support for our decision to establish boundaries. Those relatives who had experienced similar manipulation from my parents over the years rallied around us, creating a smaller but healthier family circle. I helped Megan find an apartment in the same building as my friend Jason, who had been my rock throughout the ordeal. Together with other friends, we set up a nursery for her coming baby, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and assembling furniture over pizza and laughter. That year, we hosted our first family-free holiday celebration, creating new traditions that focused on authenticity rather than obligation. I organized a baby shower for Megan, inviting her teacher colleagues and our supportive relatives. The joy and genuine warmth of that gathering highlighted how different it felt to celebrate without the underlying tension that had characterized our family events growing up. When Megan gave birth to her daughter Lily, I was there in the hospital, one of the first to hold my tiny niece. Looking down at her perfect face, I made a silent promise that she would grow up in a family environment built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and competition. As Megan adjusted to motherhood, I offered her and Lily the spare room in my house when her maternity leave ended. We set clear expectations and boundaries from the start, treating each other as respectful adults rather than competitive siblings. It was temporary, we both knew, but it gave Megan the chance to save money and plan her next steps. Through my network in the tech industry, I helped Megan secure a part-time job doing administrative work that she could largely complete from home while caring for Lily. It paid better than substitute teaching, which had been her plan, and offered more flexibility for a single parent. Together, we built a support system that didn't rely on toxic relationships or manipulative assistance. It wasn't always easy. There were disagreements and adjustments as we learned to trust each other again. But the foundation was strong because it was built on honesty. About 6 months after the court case concluded, a letter arrived from my parents. It was a formal apology, typed and signed by both of them. Reading between the lines, though, it was clear the apology was more about their desire to see their grandchild than genuine remorse for their actions. There was no acknowledgement of the financial manipulation, the lies they had told, or the damage they had caused to both their children. It was like so many things from them, hollow and self-serving. After discussing it together, Megan and I decided not to respond. Some relationships can't be fixed with words alone, and without fundamental changes in behavior. Reopening communication would only invite more manipulation back into our lives. Instead, we focused on making my house the center of new family traditions. For our first Thanksgiving after the court battle, we hosted a dinner for our chosen family friends, supportive relatives, and co-workers who had become important parts of our lives. Standing to offer a toast, I looked around at the faces of people who were there because they genuinely wanted to be, not out of obligation or hidden agendas. We raised our glasses to freedom and authentic relationships, the true wealth we had gained through our ordeal. In that moment, I knew we'd won something far more valuable than property. We had claimed our right to define family on our own terms. Looking back now, 2 years after the court case that changed everything, I can see how far we've all come. My house is fully renovated now with a new kitchen and bathrooms that I designed myself. Each change to the space has felt like reclaiming it, erasing the negative associations and replacing them with pride. Megan and Lily have their own apartment just a few blocks away. Megan was promoted to a full-time position at the tech company where I helped her get started, discovering she has a talent for project coordination that her teaching experience prepared her well for. Lily is a bright, confident toddler who knows she is loved unconditionally. My own career has flourished too. The focus I regained after the family drama subsided allowed me to earn a promotion to senior developer, with a team now reporting to me. The additional income has gone partly into investments for the future and partly into making my home exactly what I want it to be. The journey of healing hasn't always been smooth. I started therapy shortly after the court case concluded, needing professional help to process the family trauma and understand the patterns that had shaped my relationships. Through therapy, I recognized signs I'd missed throughout childhood, the way my parents had always made their approval conditional on achievement, how they had used financial support as a control mechanism, their tendency to pit Megan and me against each other. There was real grief in accepting that the parents I thought I had loving, if flawed, supporters of my independence never really existed. The people who raised me had always viewed my success through the lens of how it could benefit them or solve their problems. I worked through my anger in healthier ways, journaling, physical exercise, and honest conversations with trusted friends. I learned to build better boundaries in all my relationships, recognizing that genuine love doesn't come with strings attached. Megan underwent her own parallel healing journey. Her therapist specialized in maternal mental health, helping her work through both the trauma of our family dynamics and the challenges of new motherhood. We often shared insights from our separate therapy sessions, marveling at the similar coping mechanisms we'd developed. Despite our different experiences within the family, there are still difficult days and unexpected triggers. A certain tone of voice, a manipulative tactic observed in a work situation, even certain holiday songs can sometimes catapult me back into painful memories. But I've learned to parent myself through these moments, offering the compassion and validation I needed but didn't receive growing up. Finding community with others who've had similar experiences has been invaluable. I joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents, where the stories shared often mirror aspects of my own experience. It's been healing to both receive support and offer it to others earlier in their journey. At work, I've found myself naturally mentoring younger colleagues, navigating family pressure about their career choices. My experience has given me insight that helps them establish healthy boundaries while pursuing their own paths. Dating after such profound family betrayal was challenging. Trust doesn't come easily when the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally proved their love was anything but. But about a year ago, I met Ashley at a charity run. Her understanding of complex family dynamics, her own parents divorced acrimoniously when she was young, and her respect for boundaries made it easier to open up gradually. Our relationship has developed slowly, built on mutual respect, rather than the rushing intensity that often masks deeper incompatibility. Having her in my life has been another form of healing, proving that healthy, supportive relationships are possible. The house itself has become a physical manifestation of my journey. Removing walls and opening up the floor plan symbolized breaking down the constraints I once lived within. Creating spaces that reflect my preferences rather than anyone else's expectations represents the freedom I've found to be authentically myself. Perhaps the most bittersweet realization has been accepting that some relationships simply can't be fixed. My parents sent one final attempt at communication on my birthday last year, a card containing gift certificates and another plea to reconnect. The message showed the same inability to take genuine responsibility that characterized all their previous attempts. There were no acknowledgments of specific harms, only vague references to misunderstandings and different perspectives. I returned the gift certificates with a brief final note, explaining that reconciliation would require acknowledgement of the manipulation and financial impropriety, plus evidence of real change, not just words. There has been no response. The peace I've found comes not from fixing what was broken, but from accepting the reality of who my parents are and building a life that doesn't require their validation or approval. The freedom in letting go of impossible expectations has been its own form of healing. 3 years have now passed since I bought this house and unwittingly triggered the battle that would redefine my understanding of family. The home that was once the center of so much conflict is now filled with the warmth of chosen family gatherings. Last week, we celebrated Lily's 3rd birthday here, the living room, decorated with princess themes and filled with the sound of children's laughter. Ashley and I are engaged now, planning a small ceremony in the backyard of this very house next spring. She understands the journey I've been on and supports the boundaries I've established. Together, we're defining what family means for us: trust, respect, honesty, and the freedom to be our authentic selves. Looking back, I can see that the most valuable lesson in all of this has been understanding that family is defined by love and respect, not blood or obligation. True family empowers you to grow, rather than diminishing you to fill others' needs. Standing firm against manipulation isn't selfish, it's necessary for genuine relationships to flourish. Fighting back against my parents' lawsuit gave both Megan and me the freedom to build lives based on authentic connections rather than toxic obligation. We've both let go of the guilt about our parents' choices, recognizing that we weren't responsible for fixing the problems they created. The peace we have found comes from creating a new legacy for ourselves and for Lily. We're determined to break the intergenerational patterns of manipulation and conditional love, replacing them with transparency and acceptance. In the most unexpected way, losing our family of origin made room for authentic connections that have enriched our lives immeasurably. This house represents not just property but principles. The belief that we all deserve relationships built on genuine care rather than utility. Sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into. My house isn't just mine anymore. It's a testament to the fact that we all deserve to build our lives on foundations of respect and truth, not obligation and guilt. What foundations are you building your life on? If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Leave a comment sharing your own family boundary victories. I read every single one. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it.